From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Samantha Salinger-Morris. It's Wednesday, September 6th. Today, Qantas's outgoing boss, Alan Joyce, will leave the airline after 15 years at the helm. His tenure has been nothing if not dramatic. At one point, he steered the company away from near bankruptcy. But then, 9 days ago, Joyce faced allegations of improper government influence and anti-competitive practices at an explosive Senate hearing. He's left thousands of enraged consumers in his wake. So how will Qantas redeem itself and restore its reputation as a trustworthy airline? Today, aviation reporter Amelia McGuire on the future of our nation's carrier and what it will take for its new CEO to repair the damage done by her predecessor. So, Amelia, today, Joyce will leave the airline after 15 years, 2 months earlier than expected. What was his reasoning behind the early exit?
So Joyce announced to the ASX yesterday that he was going to retire 2 months early.
We've got some breaking news now. Qantas Group CEO Alan Joyce has advised the airline's board
the board will bring forward his retirement by 2 months.
The public pressure has become so much that he's actually finishing up today. Vanessa Hudson
His rationale for that was that the focus on Qantas and the events over the past year or so made it clear to him that the company needs to move forward with its renewal program as a priority rather than Joyce himself.
To help the company accelerate its renewal.
Vanessa Hudson takes over as chief executive.
Vanessa Hudson will assume the role of managing director.
The reasoning behind that basically comes down to a pretty shocking 2 weeks for the airline, which started with it posting a record $2.47 billion profit for the 2023 financial year.
The question a lot of people will be asking is whether that's come at the cost of higher airfares, whether it's the public that's actually providing this profit to Qantas.
No, it's really the $1 billion in restructuring that's benefited us to get our profitability there. And what we are seeing is that the higher airfares are quickly coming down because we're adding capacity.
Potentially him walking away with $24 million as a bonus as well. Some saying they should put a pause on that.
Yeah, it's really sad to see actually such a great Aussie brand slip right down the rankings.
And ended, I suppose, with the announcement from the ACCC that it was pursuing federal court action against the airline over allegations it had partaken in false advertising by allegedly breaching consumer law in the form of falsely advertising thousands of already cancelled flights.
The ACCC investigation over cancelled flights being sold on.
Greatest brands, those ghost flights, as you say, that's really impacted the public. Public have been furious about that one.
There's just so much consumer backlash, public backlash, regulatory backlash. The ACCC
Okay, and so last time we spoke to you, we discussed Qantas's embattled reputation marred by improper government influence, anti-competitive practices, and the alleged sale of tickets for already cancelled flights. That's all while making record profits to the tune of $2.47 billion. And now Joyce will step away with a huge bonus. So what does this say to the public?
It's a complicated question and one that can't really be answered in a short way, but I suppose it says to the public that it's been a really complicated year for the carrier. I mean, he is expected to be walking away with $24 million. The bulk of that amount was set into motion about 3 years ago when Joyce chose to defer his long-term bonus for 2021 and 2022. Time will tell whether the board makes a call whether to withdraw some of the short-term bonus that is yet to be granted. But the exact detail of Joyce's remuneration won't be known until the airline releases its annual report with details of executive remuneration.
Which brings us to Joyce's replacement, Vanessa Hudson. What can you tell us about her?
So Vanessa Hudson is currently the airline group's chief financial officer. She was due to take the mantle in November. That's obviously been brought forward by 2 months. Now, Joyce and Chairman Richard Goyder are confident, they say, in her ability to take the job early. She's been at the carrier for decades and is obviously, and has been, Joyce's, for lack of a better word, right-hand man for the better part of his long tenure. So it'll be interesting to see how she goes.
And so you've just mentioned, of course, Alan Joyce has had a long tenure. It's been 15 years. What sort of legacy does he leave behind?
Another complicated question. I mean, the answer to that, I think, depends on where you sit. If you're an investor for Qantas, the stock has done incredibly well over the last 15 years, and the airline has navigated a whole heap of hurdles, from birthing Jetstar, that was Joyce's first big high-profile role at the group, Australia's first low-cost carrier, to then, I suppose, a whole myriad of other challenges, which then recently culminated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And Joyce has maintained that the airline group has been profitable, with a couple of bumps in the road. But then I suppose more recently, since COVID, consumers have begun to associate the airline with lost bags and cancelled flights and just a pretty poor reputation on things like union matters, which started with the 2011 grounding of the Qantas fleet, and then more recently they've been fighting a court case in the High Court pertaining to the standing down of about 2,000 workers. So a complicated question, and yeah, it really depends on whether you're a consumer, an investor, or probably a bit of both, on what you think of Joyce and his legacy.
And Joyce has, of course, been at the centre of all of this. He's copped an immense amount of criticism, but some believe that actually should be shared, that members of the board who have time and time again backed Joyce should also step down. So what do you make of that?
I think that really depends, and a lot of this is yet to be determined, what the Qantas board and Joyce knew when. And by that I mean when we're purely talking about the ACCC action against Qantas over these allegedly cancelled flights. So the ACCC alleges that about 8,000 flights were cancelled over May and July last year, and they had been cancelled for a period of about 2 weeks before people were alerted that they were cancelled. Now, all of those people were reaccommodated on either new flights or were issued refunds, but the fact remains that even though there's not a clear benefit to the airline of this alleged action, there is significant disadvantage to the consumer. So that's all you need for an alleged breach of a consumer law. And they are facing hundreds of millions of dollars in prospective penalties if found to have partaken in that action. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from that. If the board did know early, they can expect action from ASIC, the governance regulator. But as to whether Chairman Richard Goyder or any of the other board members do actually depart, it's probably too early to make that call. There are lots of politicians, lots of unions and lots of other public figures who say that that should be the case. But yes, time will tell.
And finally, Amelia, what is the future of Qantas? I mean, just how great a task does Vanessa Hudson have on her hands in restoring the public's confidence in the national carrier?
So it's important to note that Qantas's on-time performance, cancellation rate, lost baggage rate, that is all well above board again since the period during COVID. I think all airlines were disrupted significantly, and Qantas has probably been the one that's bounced back most quickly. They've beaten their major competitor Virgin for the bulk of the year on all three of those metrics. As for whether that is enough to restore public confidence in the airline as a business, let alone from a governance or from a kind of consumer confidence measure more broadly, it's difficult to tell right now. I mean, Hudson has long said, since she was announced as Joyce's successor in May, to investors and the like, that the carrier will probably remain largely business as usual. I mean, the two are very close. She is very competent, particularly on the financial side, of navigating some of the bigger challenges that the carrier faces. But I think her biggest challenge at this point will be restoring customer trust. The first wheels of that have been set in motion, particularly with, say, restoring customer confidence in the form of flight credits. The carrier group came out last week at the same time as the federal court action was launched to say that they were going to now scrap the expiry date on any refunds, outstanding refunds. There's about $570 million worth of those yet to be refunded from COVID. I think that's one good step that the carrier's made so far to try and reverse the backlash. But it's important to note that Hudson has a much lower profile than Joyce. She, in her leadership style, many say that she does prefer to keep more in the background. So regardless, it will definitely be a very different chapter for Qantas.
Thank you, Amelia, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Julia Carr-Katzel, with technical assistance by Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Samantha Selinger Morris. This is Please Explain. Thanks for listening.